Good evening, everyone. Can you all hear me just to check to start off with? Anyone? Thank you. So, longer one than usual this time. As always, I will be bookmarking it probably about midday tomorrow when Google have finished checking everything. So if you're watching later on, there should be bookmarks if you want to skip straight to the story. Today's is a longer version, so what I may end up doing, I don't know yet, is stopping to come back and talk to chat and then starting again. We'll see how it goes and how well I keep up with chat. So the way this format works, I spend about the first 10 minutes chatting with chat and working out how and where we're going with the story. And then I try and continue and pick up bits from chat as we go along. So if you're new here, enjoy, it's good to see you. And if you've been here before, great to see you again. Hi, Emma. Emma has a minor identity crisis, but she's a friend of mine, so that's not unlikely. Yep, that's right, Fred. So the idea is I would pause with chat, and those pauses will also be bookmarked. So again, if you're in later on and you just want to skip to the next part of the story, it will all be properly bookmarked, so you can just skip along and see those points in the time bar at the bottom, or go directly via the description. So where do we think we're going? How are we starting this one? Any ideas? I've got a couple, but fantasy Victorian masquerade ball where one of the guests turns out to be Nyolarthotep. Okay. That one's filed. Yeah, we've got close to 2 hours for this, so that one will probably be a bit later on into the story, but definitely there. I quite like that. Yui didn't disappear. Hi, Tusi. Quite like that tarot card one as well. That's okay. People usually disappear at the end. It was just on that particular one, the poor protagonist survived sane. I must be slipping. We've got 8 people watching, so yes, he did. Just Yui became a paranormal investigator with Monica. About 5 minutes in, as usual. I want to try and give this about 10 minutes. It gives people that are running a little late a chance to get in and catch up, and gives us plenty of time to try and get the ideas through. And so we have tarot cards, a possibility of a circus, and a Victorian masquerade ball so far. $100 badges in top hats singing a love song to Cthulhu, if anyone wants to understand the reaction I just had. Thanks, Den. Yeah, mine are in a different room. Okay, I've got an idea for you this time, Tootie. Hi, Legion. Yeah, the idea of the tarot card gives me quite a bit to work with. Welcome anyone new in. Well, Legion, we already have 100 badges in top hats singing a love song to Cthulhu, so that one's going to be hard to top. Tootie always provides me something interesting to see if I can find a way to shoehorn in. For anyone who isn't there and is interested, people who aren't in the Patreon only have until Thursday to send an email to caveofcreation@gmail.com if they want an invite to join the Discord. So if any of you guys who are here on a regular basis want in, just shoot me an email. I know some of you are already there, so. Derek the Dice can't even pick tokens out of a bag. And for anyone that wonders what that reference is, every Sunday at about 5 o'clock Eastern, Derek, my wife and some other friends play a modern board game called Arkham Horror, a living card game. And they go insane or die horribly, as my wife just said in the background. But they generate stories as they go. So, yeah, it's worth a watch if you're about and you're interested. Canje's got a great channel. Credit where credit is due. Yeah, I 3D printed a load of boxes for mine because their boxes were failing. But I have an interesting range of toys. I've also got to try and get my head back into this world, as I got pulled out to play Factorio Space Age all day by Derek, who honestly has nothing to do with Derek the Dice, and it isn't based on him at all, ever, and my wife. Oh yeah, we've also got the Were Yeti from Scotland, haven't we? I do like the detailed conversation on tarot going on, that's quite fun. Right, we're nearly there. Just give it another couple of seconds and we can get going. So from the sound of it, I will possibly go in and try and tie up some of the stories we've already told. Clock is ticking. It's nice to have so many people watching, I have to say. Welcome all of you. And let's get started. So, in Arkham, there had been this string of missing people. There was an information broker who suddenly, one night, shuttered up his doors and went away. A private investigator shortly afterwards. No one was quite certain what he was looking into, and he disappeared. Deliveries stopped being made when a delivery driver went, and a speakeasy had to be shut down after the mobster running it completely lost his mind. All of this was happening in a very, very short period of time. But Arkham was always a strange town. In Miskatonic University, Professor Armitage, as he normally did in the morning, was reading through the newspaper, taking out, making notes, and keeping track of all of these events. He had a keen interest in the strange and the paranormal, having been involved in it and knowing far more than he would like to. He still felt sad about the young librarian who had looked at some of the books in the cellar that really should not be looked at, and completely lost his mind. Strangely, he was in the cell in Arkham Asylum next to the mobster, both of their screams clashing against each other and adding an eerie element to the sheer level of pain, agony that filtered through that abominable institution. But there was a pattern here. There was something happening, and Armitage felt he needed help. He scribbled some letters to try and find out who he knew might be available, then got on with his day. It was interesting as he continued to flick through the paper. There was a circus in town that always brought extra weirdness with it. And the usual collection of obituaries. As he went further, he saw an advertisement talking of a society event for the high and mighty who were to come to a masquerade ball in the Victorian style, should one choose to. But society events weren't for him. Far too much, far too strange, the society crowd, and many of them looked into things even darker than he had to care for. It was a couple of days before he had replies to his letters. Most weren't available, but one, someone who a few years ago had joined after strange circumstances on his farm. A lad called Huey Fredrickson and his wife Monica, both having been farmers, but something disastrous had happened on his farm, and now he spent his time looking into the strange, the dark and the terrible, and had become fairly apt at it. He was heading to Arkham and should be there within a day or two. So Armitage decided he needed to go out he needed more information, and the best place for that was the newspaper. So he went down to the Arkham Gazette and hooked up with an old friend, Albert Eisner, who was one of their longer reporters and one who had made many articles into the kind of events that caught Armitage's mind. They sat to have coffee, as they were wont to when they met. And Eisner proceeded to go through the details. How there'd been stories with a gangster about a series of barrels being found, brought in from Innsmouth, and that Mikey, a local hood, was the person who supposedly had told him about them. But no one had seen of Mikey since Donald was sent up to Arkham. But that was just one. A delivery driver who had gone into a local warehouse. He'd heard from a friend who was a private investigator about strange things, and shortly afterwards the investigator had disappeared, and so, for that matter, had the delivery driver. Now, the warehouse was down by the docks, so could that be linked to the barrels from Innsmouth? Innsmouth was equally a port town. Eisner provided tidbits. Derek had disappeared. He'd been down on his luck. Things hadn't been working for him. And then he vanished. Closed his shop, but he must be out in Arkham somewhere. All bits that ticked boxes inside Armitage's head. He headed back to the university, into his office in the library, and pulled out a map, marking points where all of these activities had occurred. Interestingly, right in the middle was the location that this society ball was supposed to happen, and just outside was the circus. He had a horrible feeling that it was all building to something, and something big, and that was never good in Arkham. When Yui arrived, they sat and they discussed it. Yui was a country lad, so wasn't that familiar with the city. But he and Monica were strong. He was good on a rope, so they thought that they might go and look at the circus. They would certainly be completely out of place at a society event. Eisner had joined them for this and said that he could head in that direction, as a reporter he'd be expected to be there making notes. So there they had it. They'd separate and go in their different directions. Meanwhile, Armitage would stay at the university because he was wasn't getting any younger and was quite frail now. But he could still put together all of the pieces. They looked along the dockfront, trying to see if they could work out which warehouse it might be, but figured that might wait for another. That evening, as the circus opened, Yui and Monica headed in. As usual, it was not just a big top. There were multiple acts in multiple areas. There was the freak show, there was the strong man. There was the little show where you could go and spend your money and lose it. But what else? They didn't know. Wandering into the freak show, you had the usual bearded lady, sat watching and talking and joking. You had contortionists that could bend in weird directions, animals with multiple heads. One hissed in their direction was a snake-like creature, but with arms in a cage, looking quite horrific and very, very terrifying. Across the bottom was the title, The Spawn of Yig. But they looked, they shuddered, for they were aware of the case of Yig, and it was not a pretty one. They continued walking through. There were tarot readers, and Monica paused, taking him over, sitting him down. I want a reading. I need to know what our future holds. Yui was not keen. They lived close enough within the strange, as it were. But they sat. She got her cards and lay down a spread, her eyes widening as death appeared in the middle, under the hanged man, with the tower, the devil, and strangely, the Hierophant off to the side. All majors, no minor to be seen. It was a strong reading, to be sure, and the reader's face went pale. She looked and death does not necessarily mean a bad thing. Death just means change, the end of something, the birth of something new. But it sounded like she was pushing, she was hoping, but she didn't believe it herself. She went to pull one card, tucked it aside, and pulled another, with relief, laying down the Lovers. Ah, this showed you together. It must be you. You are in love. See? Your love is strong. Everything will be good. The woman was very flustered. And sneakily, Yui watched as she turned, trying to catch a glimpse of what that card could be, the one that was concealed. All he saw briefly was a flicker of yellow and a picture of a crown. The king in yellow, he thought. No, not this time. With that, she wrapped up the, I can read no more. I'm too tired. The time has come. She ushered them to the door, and they stepped out. Continuing to look round, from the cages at the back, there were strange noises. But the time for the show had come. They stepped into the dark. The tent was dimly lit, with some few lights pointed at the ring in the centre. They quietly took seats at the back. interested to watch and see what was going to happen. The ringmaster came out. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the magnificent Bartholomew Thorpe Circus. Today we will startle you with unusual sights, acts of bravery, stunning feats of daring, and of course clowns, because everybody loves clowns. And with that, a little car came out from behind, filled with people in funny dresses, and they all bumbled out and did a little comedy routine. Some of them running up into the audience. But as they watched, there was something strange about the clowns. Something not quite right. Though they were heavily made up and heavily costumed, it was in the eyes. There was a strange yellow tint to the eyes that just didn't seem right, with a bit of a glazed look. They kept back, with Monica stepping behind Yui because she did not want to get close. Clowns scared her. The clowns were horrible. They ran, they did their bit, they got back into their car and they drove off. But looking at the people they'd interacted with, they seemed in a little bit of a daze now, not quite with it. The rest of the show was fairly mundane. There was the high wire act, there were acrobats, there were lions, there were tigers, but there was nothing else out of the ordinary. But all of those people, as Yui and Monica watched, still never seems to quite connect with the rest of the show the way everybody else did. At the end, again, the ringmaster came out. Some of you were given invites by the clowns. Come backstage, come and meet the company. The rest of you, thank you and good night. Monica and Yui cast a nervous glance at each other as they were shuffled out the back and the curtains closed. They moved cautiously, leaving the circus, but then waited as everybody else left. And they watched, but they could not see any of the people that had gone backstage leave. For some reason, they seemed to have stayed. Deliberately, waiting till dark, they sat in the cold and snuggled up beside each other in the car, still thinking about the tarot reading and what could it actually mean, and thinking of that card, the flash of yellow in the eyes and the King of Yellow. He'd heard of Hasta, but no, not here, please. There was enough with the old ones right now. If Hasta had come in, then that would be truly bad. Okay, we've got a start. We've got an idea of clowns giving a special drink. Quickly, before we go back in, what other ideas have we got? Just check and make sure that... Nope, my chat's still working. Ah, there we go. Well, I had a lot of interesting different requests. I don't think Elvis is in this one. So we've still got the drink. Anything else for anybody? I only want to spend a couple of minutes on these kind of middle ones so that we don't hold up and make anyone who isn't getting involved. Always bolt guns. This period may be bolt cutters. Right, let's flip back in. When everybody was gone, Monica and Yui snuck back in cautiously, keeping their eyes open, avoiding the freak show, lest they got smelled by some of the creatures that got spooked, and moving up, peeking into the big top. Most of the lights had come down, and there was a strange smell starting to permeate. They snuck into the top, moving round the outsides, avoiding any traces of light. In the distance, they could hear slightly insane laughter. They moved round to where the curtain leading to the rear area was, and peeked through. The sign was horrific. The clowns, without their makeup, still looked like clowns. They still looked inhuman. And the dazed guests were stood there with the clowns moving along, almost selecting partners and taking them away. The ringmaster with there was, yes, take your choice. And who knows what the results will spread. What was happening left little to the imagination, and both Monica and Yui could only think of the lover's card that had shown up, but mingled with the fated king in yellow. They paused. There was only two of them. What could they do? Most of the selections seemed of the poorer sort and somewhat older, but there was one young girl, 18, 19, seeming to be led away by one of the more sinister looking clowns. They looked at each other and just shook their heads. They could not let it happen. Yui looked round and found a sturdy piece of wood, and they followed. It was as though when they got into the rear area, they stepped into another dimension. The rooms didn't fit the space they had. Angles overlapped angles. The eye couldn't follow the bends and twists. The curtains and the drapes seemed to make strange shapes. And in the corridors, there were creaks, there were groans, and there were moans, all pervading a strangely sweet smell, almost hypnotic. They shook their heads and pinched each other, not letting themselves get drawn in as they walked carefully through, Yui holding the piece of wood. There was a slight giggling from the girl and a creepy laugh coming from the clown. Quietly catching up, they saw them pause, just going round a corner, and Yui acted. He lifted his board and brought it down against the clown's head. The clown stumbled, and Monica dragged the girl back. The clown eyes flashed yellow and bared teeth with fangs. Yui started backing up, holding the stick. They knew they were in trouble. The clown charged at them. Yui swung again, knocking him away. And as the clown tripped, they turned and ran, bringing the girl with them. As they headed through, trying to find an entrance, the rooms got darker and the corridors got narrower. They could feel bits almost like tentacles pulling towards them. They didn't know what was where or where they were. They just crossed their fingers, held tight, and ran. They heard a scream further on, but it sounded human, so they focused in that direction. Charging through, they started to come out, seeing more and more natural curtains. In the darkness, they were heading towards the big top. They charged through, not caring about stealth. Yui saw some oil lamps and knocked them over, the sides catching fire and erupting in flames as they ran through. They charged and found themselves coming out into the area that had the freak show. Some of the creatures turned. There was one looking almost imploringly for help. The snake creature hissed. But they had not time to deal with these. They ran. They could hear steps behind them, and they dared not turn to look. In front of them, a couple of burly circus folk appeared. Not the clowns, but Yui didn't care. He dropped a shoulder and charged. He had a big build, he was broad of shoulder. He had been a farmer all his life, so he charged straight through them, knocking them to the side. They ran out, pulling the girl with them, getting her into the back of the car. Start! The engine didn't turn. Lights were coming on. The top was starting to go up as the fire had hit the curtains and was moving across. Start! As it caught, there was a woof as the entire big top released a giant multicoloured fireball, filling the air with that strange stench. They paused, going a bit woozy, but the car had started and they drove. Yui drove as fast as he could. They had to get away. As they did, Monica was looking at the girl, who had light starting to come back to her eyes and was starting to cry. Monica consoled the girl as they drove back into Arkham, recovering and knowing that they had stopped something quite atrocious, as in the distance, the light of the big top burning lit the far sky, but with far more than the reds and yellows of a normal fire. There were purples, violets, and colours that Yui couldn't describe. He knew that circus had been dealing with those of the dark, but it hadn't been here when everything started. So, was it the cause? Was it effect? Or was it just something entirely to the side? So that's that one wrapped up, and I'm just going to stop for a moment and then I will be back. Okay, that picked up the wrong image. So did that one. I guess I'm staying. Actually, let's go back to this one. Right, that's better. Yeah, that was just an intermission. There should have been a back soon, but it looks like I copied the wrong image into it. I did create the image for the back soon. Right, so. And back into the story. That evening, they dropped the girl off, and the next day, they met with Armitage and explained what had happened. They sat down and decided that maybe after the ball, they should go and look at the warehouses. But that night was the ball, and when Albert went, Yui and Monica were going to wait close by in the car just to make sure they could help should there be any similar issues. They met that evening. Albert, all dressed up in a full tuxedo with a mask, ready to go, and headed in. The music was awful. It sounded as though it was being played by 100 badgers. Interestingly, the musicians were all wearing top hats, but well, he didn't think they were badgers, but it was music that only Cthulhu could like. So, wincing, he went in while they were creating this horrible cacophony that for some reason a lot of people seemed enchanted by. Thoughts went through his mind. He touched the small relic that had been given by Armitage, and it felt slightly warm. And suddenly he realized that maybe it was doing something. Maybe this song, this music, wasn't normal. There was something strange about the band. And everybody going round with masks. As they went through, there was one particularly tall gentleman. He must have been close to 7 feet. As he went over, he was introduced to Mr. Blackwood. He nodded. "Oh, have you been here before?" "No," said Mr. Blackwood. "I had a brief visit a long time ago. I was visiting an information broker, but he left and broke up. And now I'm talking to these people. Would you be interested?" Eisner backed away. There was something in his eye, something in the tone of his voice. "I'm just a simple reporter. I'm fine." He smiled and nodded, and headed to some of the more debauched members. He saw them looking at him as he pulled out a card and passed it over, and there was a slight glaze. Then he walked out with the gentleman, a young socialite by the name of Gilbert, and didn't see them again all evening. But that was aside. As he spoke, more people said that actually Blackwood was the person who'd organised this event. But that was done now. There was little other information he could find. As he went looking around outside, he heard the sound of strange pipes, mixed within the cacophony caused by the band. But everyone else seemed to think it was melodic. There were people saying how it was the perfect love song. Love song for Cthulhu, Eisner thought. But music had never been his thing. Realizing he wasn't going to find much more, but making a note of the name Blackwood, who had mysteriously disappeared with the socialite, he headed out into the evening, for he'd had enough for one night. The excitement of the last couple of days had been taxing on all the investigators as they met the next morning. But they still had more to do. They'd worked out about the circus, and that seems to be one section that they were aware of. They'd gone to the socialite event, and that was another. How many of the old ones, how many cults, or what was going on? Arkham was very much becoming a focus. But why? It had always been bad, but this was worse than usual. If you hear any pops, there's fireworks going on in the background. They headed out the next evening to go down to the docks. They had 2 bits that they still had to work out. Where the information broker, who they could only figure had been the same person that Blackwood had been mentioning, had disappeared to, and what was happening in the docks. So they moved down, all of them armed. Even Monica had a small, delicate little 38. They had shotguns, 1 pump-action shotgun, and they went to search. As they walked round the docks, the smells were fetid, but across them all there was one stronger, more fishy smell than they'd realised. following their noses, they headed down, and there was a dark warehouse that reeked. They paused and listened, and they could hear chanting coming from inside. Armitage put his hand and pulled out a book. Hopefully, we will not need this tonight. They moved in. They could see where deliberately a set of fire escapes had been broken off, not leaving an easy way up to go and see through the windows. But Monica and Yui smiled. Yui braced, Monica put his foot in, and he lifted her, making her able to catch and pull herself up onto the first section of the fire escape. She headed up, she looked in, and even from the bottom, they could hear her gasp. She came back down, saying, "There's rituals, they're sacrificing, there were creatures in there. They seem to be making some kind of summoning. There's a portal." I told her to calm down. And they went to the door. The smell was horrendous as it was. The stench of rotten fish, but with an overlaying odour of it. They caught the door and just ripped it open. It was noisy, but they feared there was no time. Stepping in, they saw a horrific sight. Bodies dangling, suspended from their arms, having had cuts and welts, bits bitten out of them. Where the warehouse went over the dock, there was a break through the floor so it could go straight down into the water. And that water was black and dark. There were boxes around, and cultists who looked at them and drew knives. They backed away, having not expected quite this much to fight against. They looked at each other and drew their guns, but that was not the best. He grabbed his book, and Armitage set and started chanting. As he did, various sigils on the wall started glowing, and the water in the centre started swirling. Someone on the other side started chanting, "Cthulhu Fatagan, Cthulhu Fatagan," as the water swelled and tentacles started coming out. The heroes backed away, the tentacles thrashing, grabbing anything they could find and sucking them into the water. The world swirled, mist filled the room and started piling out through any crevice it could find. There were figures tied into the mist. But in the background, he could hear flutes. And from the distance, a yellow light fought against the mist, as though they were conflicting. Making a quick prayer, they watched as Armitage stepped forward and looked at the strange symbols, at the hole in reality that the pool had become, where the poor cultists had been dragged. They looked over as a smaller one darted across and a tentacle caught the ankle, pulling back. The cow falling, showing a mop of blonde hair as the girl desperately grabbed to hold on to something as she was being pulled towards the water. The screams and the crunching sound from the water were horrendous, and people watched. One of the cultists sat in the corner, gibbering, laughing and rocking and looking, until a tentacle put him out of his misery. Another had grabbed a flame and was batting now at this strange abomination he'd been involved in summoning. Yet a third just screamed, charged, put his arms out as though going to hug into the water, calling the name Cthulhu as he splashed and a tentacle smashed him up. Various of the barrels smashed open and fish creatures emerged, grabbing some more of the cultists. One headed towards the girl that was desperately clinging on. There was a loud boom as Eisner set off the pump-action shotgun he was holding, pushing back the fishman, but not taking him out. Again and again, suddenly, Armitage pointed a hand, screamed a word, and a jet of flame wrapped round the fishman, the heat melting him, adding a cooking scent that made the odour more pungent and frightful as it screamed and melted before them into a foul goo on the floor. The flame caught the tentacle, and the girl scrabbled in their direction, trying to get to safety. Yui pulled her beside him. She may have been a cultist, but she didn't deserve this. They turned, all of them using whatever weapons they had to keep away the fishmen, the cultists that were trying to get past, and most of all, the tentacles. Grabbed a fire axe and were chopping the tentacles, keeping them back. No, back! One slipped through, caught Eisner by the leg, pulling him. He was caught and pulled before Yui or Monica could get to him. Then, as he went screaming, he was pulled towards the dock, towards the hole. He turned and looked into it, and forever they were thankful that they did not see what he had, for the scream of agony and insanity as his mind broke was agonizing and terrifying, and was cut off sharply with a gurgle as he disappeared into the black. The volume and the strength of Armitage's chanting grew. There were flashes of fire-like colours. There were clouds. In the distance, the pipes worked with his chanting, lifting his noise. As fire came from the clouds and pushed in towards the water, pushing it down, making it boil and bubble, screams came, and the tentacles pulled back, batting at the fire. The air churned with smoke, with smell, and with noise. The volume was agonizing. The heat caught the walls as gradually the warehouse started, despite its dampness, to burn. Then, as the fire opened a hole in the roof, a rogue bolt of lightning struck down with a thunderous crash straight into the center, and then was gone. The tentacles separated, burnt and fizzled. Those that could fell tumbling back into the swirl of water that erupted, then fell back quiet, coughing and spluttering. Monica, Yui, pulled the poor wretched cultist, and them and the professor stumbled to the outside as the entirety of the warehouse caught fire, and they sat and watched as it gradually burned to the ground. Armitage looked at them. "I don't know what to say," he said. "I think we've both been lucky and terribly unlucky tonight. For we've been involved in a battle between gods. Yet we've mostly escaped with our sanity. Rest well, my friends." He looked towards the burning. "And we must mourn our fallen comrade. But not tonight. Tonight is for the living." The girl was on the floor, sobbing. "What have I done? I didn't know. I didn't know." "Don't worry. There's more to the world, and you can help us fight. But for now, we must rest." How was that? I think, Tootie, I got your badges and stuff in there. We got the Masquerade Ball. We got the circus. I hope you all enjoyed it. Those who came back at the end, this will be staying on YouTube. I will tidy it up tomorrow. I've got to wait till YouTube finishes processing it, and it will probably be close to tomorrow lunchtime before it does. Take off the stream part at the beginning, and then mark and make sure the bits where we stopped are bookmarked, so you could go straight from one to the other. Outside of that, please like, subscribe and comment. If you want to, join us on Patreon. I'm still away from being able to do YouTube memberships. I've got enough subscribers, but I need about another 12 to 1300 view hours. So if you want to watch something several times, I'd be grateful. But no, you don't need to. Otherwise, for people this month, I've been offering easy access to the Discord, email caveofchronicles@gmail.com, and go watch some of this stuff on Canje Studios page. With that said, it's been great fun. Thank you all. I think for these longer ones, what I need to do is try and work out a bit more of a structure in advance and then tweak them, because with the length, it's hard to keep it going. Keeping my brain running quite that fast for quite that long is a challenge. Keeping my brain running at any time is a challenge, to be honest. But that said, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope to see many of you in the Discord. That clock's wrong. At 8 o'clock, we've got the first of this week's special, which is going to be The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. You see, my brain isn't functioning at all. So that's in about an hour that premieres. And then there's one of those every day for 5 days up until Halloween. And then we go back onto a bit more of a new normal schedule. That said, bye for now. And remember, the circus can be a scary place, but most of all, beware of the clown.